updating technology, fixing the bureaucracy that's been broken, and also stirring up the political system. The unemployment rate, 4.1%, lowest since 2000. Confidence up, business up. You're looking at an improvement in the economy. In the Broadcom announcement last week, that's an ideal that we want to achieve. Companies coming back.
Nikki, but we don't have any legislative wins, do we, in this country?
No, we do not. And I think we are more divided. I was hoping within this last year that we would have come together and found some unity, and I don't think that's happened. I think all of our positions has just hardened. People have gone more right and people have gone more left.
Kieran, you agree with that?
I think so. I think one of the ironies is we learned in the last week part of the division is being stirred up by the Russians. We know that there was a rally right after the election last year that was essentially organized by Russians on Facebook, and liberals went out at the behest of the Russians and badmouthed the president.
And you think if we had a legitimate investigation at that, we'd find that both sides were there to cause friction with each other, and they're getting exactly what they wanted?
Yeah, absolutely. The Russians, no matter who's the president, they want to undermine the United States.
And I think that's pretty clear. Chuck Rocha, I think the Democrats are still reeling. They're still examining what went wrong. And when you look at Donna Brazil's book and the book tour that never ends with Hillary Clinton, correct?
I think you're right, but I think last night heals a lot of those wounds. Democrats had a huge election night last night, and years later, we won the governorship in a state that's been purple for a long time. We almost picked up the state house.
A Democrat replaces a Democrat.
This wave happened. So you have a reaction from the American people. So a year ago, people were really frustrated, and a lot of the American people took a chance on Donald Trump because they wanted to do something different. Sure, they even wanted to break some of the glasses. Let's shake this thing up. But they really haven't seen any real results legislatively, as you said, over the past year, and he controls the Republican House, the Senate, and I think the American people said, look, we're willing to take a chance, but we want to get something back in return.
Emma, do you think that you feel as though the Republicans had to get used to governing? Is that what we're seeing now, them getting their legislative feet underneath them?
Well, I don't know. It seems like it's mayhem in Washington, and left and right, we're seeing Republicans leave Washington. There's less and less confidence in the administration, in the president, and this is really affecting the populace and how we feel about the administration in our country.
Elliot, as a dad of two, an attorney, former prosecutor, do you feel a difference out there today?
Well, look, one promise he made with regard to the courts as an attorney, he said he would fill the Scalia seat with the strict constructionist in the mold of Antonin Scalia. With that, in that regard, promise made, promise kept.
Professor Wendy Acefo, first off, I've watched you a lot on the channel in between, so you're relatively open to seeing some change. Do you feel as though the country has changed as the economy grows and militarily we're flexing our muscle?
Yeah, I think that the economy has changed and our country has changed, but we cannot negate the fact that there has been some promises made that have not been kept. And if we look last night at what was seen as a referendum against the Trump administration, you see a lot of people saying, you know what, we voted for you, we wanted to see some change, but we haven't seen anything. And if you compare him to his predecessors, you had, Obama in his first few months passing the Ledbetter Act. And right now, we don't see that coming out of the Trump administration. We don't have those hardcore things to say we're going to move our country forward.
Aaron, as you watch the president overseas, you see how it's respected in the Middle East. You saw a lot of the pushing and pulling in Europe, but now it seems the friendships might be taking root. And then you see how it's respected in Asia, as so far, with the biggest moves being with Putin tomorrow and today with China. What are you seeing, how we're represented?
America should be proud of his diplomacy. He's been doing so well internationally, but domestically, I think we have touched on a lot of the statistics about Donald Trump's successes in the last year. I think him being elected, the big thing there was his election was a rejection of elitism, whether it's elitism in the media, whether it's liberal elitism in general. And you know what this is telling people? We did want to change. Donald Trump was that breath of fresh air in the broken system, and there are so many statistics to back this up. We just touched on unemployment is at a 17-year low. Housing prices are 6.1%. higher than they were in August. Right. So the numbers tell a different story, and we do need some of those legislative things to happen, and I think they will, and we're looking towards that.
Lauren, are you comfortable with him taking on Republicans?
Absolutely. I think that's been the problem in Washington right now, is that up on Capitol Hill you have this game of playground politics. You've got the Republicans in Washington who were elected on the exact same thing that the president was elected on. They were elected by their constituents to do the exact same thing that this president was elected to do. They're not doing their job. They're not working for the American people. They need to remember what they were elected to do, and they need to get back to doing their job, but they need to forget whatever personal issues they have with this president.
And Keisha, you know, he didn't take power until January, really February, you know, with his 9 months. And now on deck, they say maybe even before Thanksgiving will be tax reform. Do you feel as though the Republicans are on the pad to pass something that will have, the launch pad, to pass something that will have impact?
I think it will be a negative impact for the majority of Americans, and I'm disappointed in this first year because there is a huge divide in our country, and I see it in the court system. I'm an attorney. I feel it, and even with a lot of the issues of distrust because of the Russian suspicions, it's just not what we all expected or wanted for this country. In fact, it's worse.
Right. Do you feel as though Democrats have fueled the Russian suspicions, or do you think they just want to get to the bottom of it?
I think they just want to get to the bottom of it. Like all of us, we want what's right and what's safe for our country.
Right. David, you feel the same way?
No, the Democrats, look, Brian, the Democrats don't want to get to the bottom of it. If they've done with wedge issues over the years, be it social issues or otherwise, they use these issues to divide the country. And by the way, whether it's a president who's a Republican or Democrat at the top, it's up to the country to be united. The people across America, I travel this country, they have a different view. They may have disagreements. They're not as divided as the wings would like to tell us, or the elitists, or those that want to draw us far right, far left, or far outside the political spectrum.
All right, show of hands, who a year ago was positive that Hillary would win? A little more than half of you. All right, who predicted that Donald Trump was going to win? Only 4 of you. All right, who is pleased with year 1 of the Trump administration? All right. Aaron, let's start with you. Why?
Well, I think, look, we need to do some things on regulations, right? In terms of, we've already reduced the cost of regulations, but in terms of legislation, we do need to get some things done. But if you look at some numbers, he has made some really, really great accomplishments.
Just on his own, without the help of Congress.
Absolutely. It's been totally unilateral. For example, the Dow has had 72 closing highs since President Trump took office. 72. Our most recent was on November 3rd, and that was the all-time high. Merger and acquisition transitions totaled $1.2 trillion since he took office. So our economy is surging. Unemployment is down below almost 4%, which is a 17-year low. He has done a lot of great things for our economy.
Okay, so we had Stuart Varney on in the first hour of the program, and we were talking about how the economic numbers have gone crazy. Happy days are here again, is what they're saying down on Wall Street. Who's actually felt that in their pocket, though, where you've seen your 401k go up or your bank account? Elliot, tell us about that.
You know, I'm invested in index funds, so index funds go up and down with the S&P 500 in general. So no question, the S&P's had a great run since he became president.
And what do you think about the next year?
Well, look, I don't know if they're going to get a tax package through. And you mentioned he's gotten no help from Congress. That's true, but that's on him. Why is he picking fights on Twitter with moderate Republicans who are his natural allies?
Chuck, you're right next to him. When you look at the 2 gubernatorial races, both went to Democrats in blue states yesterday. Neither one of them really embraced Donald Trump. And when you look at Ed Gillespie, he's as establishment as they get. What's the message to politicians on the Republican side when it comes to embracing Donald Trump if they want to run for high office?
You know this. I run campaigns for a living, and there's an old adage: is you don't let your opponent identify you before you get a chance to identify yourself. The other thing is figuring out how close to Donald Trump do they really want to get. The base of the Republicans and the base of Democrats are going to show up, and what we have to realize in 2018, the Republicans need to, and I'm no Republican strategist, but if I was doing their playbook, is how do you expand that base? Because last night proved that there's a wave coming on the Democratic side, even though maybe we had never seen wins like that. We picked up 27 state House legislatures since he's been in office. Maybe I should have raised my hand when I said I was happy for it. It's good for Democratic strategists.
It's good for your business. Wendy, what do you think about year 1 for Donald Trump?
You know, to be quite honest, I don't think it's gone well. And I think if he wants to maintain his seat and run again in 2020, you cannot sell the same thing without evidence. And that's what we're seeing right now. He has to have evidence, and that evidence will be rooted in legislative wins. And so we have to make sure that we hold him accountable. And I don't think that that's necessarily a partisan issue. That's an American issue, making sure our president is held accountable.
And David Webb in the back row right there. You know, one of the problems for Donald Trump is he wanted to drain the swamp He went to Washington. For the most part, the swamp's still there.
Well, yeah, the swamp's going to be there for some time. You're not going to unravel what has been 7+ decades of the swamp growing in Washington. You can pull the plug on it, but it's going to take time to unravel the bureaucratic problems that are there. There is a deep state in the sense of a legislative structure, a support system, and lobbyists and special interests. You look at the District of Corruption and the documentary that was there about D.C. and the surrounding power and the money that circles that city, that's not going to go away. And we're not even really into true year one, just year one since the election. So we can't write the legislative obituary on the Trump administration when you literally are not even into the full year one of the administration.
All right, on the other side of the back row, we've got Lauren Arpel. Lauren, what do you think about the fact that, as we heard earlier, Congress, while they are Republican-controlled, not really helping the president?
They're not really helping the president, and you're starting to see it with people like Jeff Flake and Bob Corker. They're looking at their internal poll numbers, and their constituents are starting to retire them, and they've chosen not to run for re-election. And they need to get on board with this president, or they're going to see it in their next election cycle. They need to put their personal differences aside, whatever their issue may be. Maybe their primary candidate didn't win, and they're upset about that. Maybe they have a personal issue with him, that they don't like him, they don't like his personality, they don't like that he tweets, whatever the case may be. They need to put it aside, and they need to remember why they were elected, and they need to start doing their job.
All right, Nikki, you're right next door to her. I know you're a Democrat.
I am a Democrat.
But you're sympathetic to the Trump voter.
I am sympathetic. I wrote about the plight of the white working class during the election because I think it very much tracks with the plight of the black working class. I think that unity is what's missing. In terms of the lack of legislative success by Donald Trump, in some ways I think that has been to his benefit to have his party go against him because he ran as a populist, as someone who was outside of both of those parties, and I think that just reinforces for his voters that he's something different, and for Democratic voters, Republicans not supporting him reinforces for us that he's not the person we necessarily want representing the country.
All right, Keisha, down in the front row right here. Donald Trump, when he was running for president, made a lot of promises. He's only in 1 year. Hasn't had a lot of help from Congress. Do you feel like he has kept his promises thus far?
Absolutely not. While I can appreciate someone who's real and speaks their mind, I love people like that. I think he did a lot of talk and not a lot of acting.
But don't most politicians do that?
They do, but I think one of his major problems is that he's trying to run the country like it's a business, and I hear all the financial numbers and the unemployment rates are down, but we have to remember that this is a country of people, and I think the legislators are not passing what he wants because they're thinking of what's good for the people and not necessarily what's good for the finances of our country.
Of course, the president right now is in China. He is, he's got some deals going over there. I think we're going to be hearing about. Kieran, you're a former infantryman and in the Marine Corps Reserve. How do you feel about his message of strength through power that he's projecting around the world?
I think it's been outstanding. And, you know, in the past 10 months that he's been president, his overseas trips have been some of his finest hours. His speech in Poland back in the spring or summer was described by everyone as Reagan-esque. He really reminded us the gift of freedom that we have here. If you see some of the pictures of him in Japan with American troops, he's like a rock star to the American military man who I think under 8 years of Obama felt like you know, they were doing a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of heavy fighting, but the man in the White House didn't necessarily have their back. I think they feel that President Trump has their back.
At your back is Emma. Emma, you're the final contestant we haven't spoken to yet. What's your observation about year one of the Trump administration?
Look, I was a huge Hillary supporter, and I campaigned very publicly for her. I was very disappointed, needless to say. And when it comes to women and policies on women, he has proven to be a bigger disappointment than I had ever imagined. All of his policy is attacking women's rights, whether it be reproductive rights, family rights, when we're talking about funding for after-school programs, early Head Start programs, for military families, for child care for military families, funding is being threatened. So we're not just talking about questionable policies like reproductive rights. We're talking about policies that affect working families, the working families that elected Trump.
Sure. Emma, as you look at the state of your party right now, after Donna Brazile has come out with her book that shows that the DNC, it looks like, was in the tank for Hillary, and all those Bernie supporters, they thought he had a chance, but really he didn't, and all this other stuff. your party's in trouble.
Yes, it's not a pretty picture. It's not a good look. And but you know what? One of the greatest things that's come out of this election is that it has highlighted problems that need addressing. It has paid attention, it's forced us to pay attention to gender inequality. I don't believe that we would have this Weinstein scandal going on if the presidency had not highlighted some of this pent-up anger that is in the American women. When it comes to the party, yeah, we have big problems in the Democrat Party. And Donna's book and the failed election are just evidence of that. So we can get to work now.
All right, exit question once again, audience participation. Can I see the hands of those who are hopeful that year 2 is even better than year 1? Not hopeful? I guess not. That's okay.
You all remember where you were, right? Some of you were crying, some of you were cheering, right? You were. What were your thoughts last year at this time?
My thoughts was it was not a surprise. Hillary Clinton was the worst candidate I've seen run on a national stage. She didn't go to key states. To Chuck's earlier point about going after those independents, not the base, she never went there. And Donald Trump reflected what union members at UAW, what others said around the country. It's our kitchen table, our economics, and we need a change in Washington with the establishment on all sides.
Yeah, did it backfire on her? I guess it did, obviously, when she talked about deplorables and she called Trump supporters racist. Just put a blanket statement over the whole.
Insulting Americans is never a good idea when you're running for national office. Let's just call it that.
All right, that's David Webb. You know David, Fox News contributor, radio talk show host. Elliot, I'll go to you next. Elliot Feelig, he's a husband, father of 2, attorney, and former prosecutor.
You know, I was hopeful because he said in his victory speech, he said, I want to bind the wounds of division. And it sounded sincere. He said he wanted to unite the country. He seemed to recognize this division. Unfortunately, as Jeff Flake pointed out, he seems to take joy in division. He doesn't seem to really mean it, that he doesn't really want to unite us.
Yeah, the division started day 1 after the election with the resistance led by the Democrats, fostered by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. We're now hearing that the Democrats, as they've always been with identity politics, are interested in dividing the country. Find me the legislation he's put in place about divisiveness.
Wendy
disagrees.
Dr. Wendy Osefo, she has her PhD, liberal political commentator. You disagree with David. Why?
I do disagree with David because we're making it seem as though Trump has not added to the wounds of this country. He has done so. We have to hold him accountable.
What has he done that you
He has used language that has ignited the flames. He has called mothers of athletes, you know, sons of bees. Like, there's things that he has done that has made it so you have to choose one side or another.
You're talking about the national anthem?
Yeah, and I believe that we have to, as a leader, your job is not to divide, your job is to heal. And especially if you reside at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, that job is greater for you.
Kieran, I want to go to you because you fought for our country. This is Kieran Lawler, retired infantryman in the Marine Corps Reserves, Republican New York Assemblyman. We're talking about the national anthem. What are your thoughts?
You know, the national anthem has always been a source of unity. My family only goes back 75 years in this country, but I feel connected to George Washington. I feel connected to the Star-Spangled Banner and those things, and that's what unifies us. You know, Clarence Thomas was on this network the other day, and he said we've lost the unum in e pluribus unum, and the national anthem, by undermining the national anthem, we're undermining that unity. And I think President Trump has unified a lot of Americans behind the fact that we want the anthem respected.
I know.
Sorry, this is not about the national anthem. This is about inequality. Inequality, opportunity is what binds Americans.
Nikki, let me introduce you. This is Nikki Johnson Houston. She's an attorney, Democratic, sympathetic to Trump voters, you say. You told our producers. I do want to talk to you about this because we need to listen. No matter if you disagree with the people that are kneeling and not standing up. I'm one of those. I think everyone should stand. However, I do want to hear from the individuals that are kneeling because I love them. We love them. They're Americans. They support the black community. They go into their communities and they do so much for their families and for charitable organizations. So we need to listen to them. You say it's about unifying our country. How do we do that?
But it's about inequality that has been experienced by the African American community, about us not having access to good education, safe schools, good neighborhoods,
so how do we
being able to move out.
Nobody said the military does, but why are we? But what? You know what? I'm sorry. Inequality
inequality is divisive. You know what? If we when we riot, when we riot, we are told that we are being divisive. When we march, we're told we're being divisive. When we kneel, no, I'm sorry. This is a peaceful protest.
And this is the most patriotic thing that you can do. And when we have our leaders, and I don't care who they are, if they're the white NFL executives or they are our black African-American NFL stars that are looked up to by all races in this country, this is democracy, this is patriotism, and this is peaceful protest, and this is change, which I think we all agree here. We need change in this country. What a more beautiful way to express that.
Just because you don't agree doesn't mean that they can't do it. It's their First Amendment right. You talk about the Second Amendment right.
I disagree with you. I'm trying to ask a simple question. You talk about inequality. How do you get to inequality? If you talk about education, you have to look at the failure in the inner cities, the failure of the public school system, the failure to support school choice, the failure to give people options for an education.
It's a bunch of political policy wonk. And it goes in one ear and out the other. But when we have our sports leaders making a very simple, eloquent message, people listen and they talk about it.
No one can hear you at home when you all yell. You've watched so many panels. It's annoying when you're at home because we can't hear you at all. Chuck, let's change the conversation because that's a little too heated right now. Let's talk about, we appreciate it, but let's move on to the news of the day. Donna Brazile, she originally said that the election was rigged in Hillary's favor, and then she walked that back, and the word that she used was cancer. How do you feel? Because if people don't know your past, let me read this. Chuck Rocha, he's Democratic strategist, president of Solidarity Strategies, and you were a former Bernie surrogate. You're still friends with him today. Have you talked to him or some people that work with him, and what's his reaction?
Look, I dedicated a year of my life to the campaign. I was a senior advisor. I was there for 14 months. I was in the inner bowels of the campaign making very senior decisions. I watched an American revolution actually happen where people thought they had a voice. We brought in Democrats. We brought in Republicans. We brought in independents. We've seen these young kids who thought, what are the possibilities that we maybe could reach for something, right? And we all felt like we were running against the machine and the establishment. We never knew everything that was going on. This book brought it to light. It's very disappointing, but not for me. It's about the people who actually came out and voted. It's about those young kids between the ages of 18 and 26 who maybe had never participated before, Ainsley, who want to do something a little bit different. I feel sad for them because their vote maybe at the end of the day really didn't even count.
Yeah, Aaron Elmore in the back row, former Apprentice contestant, Trump supporter. You wanted to come on this morning. We were talking in the green room. You wanted to give your opinion about gun control.
Absolutely. Well, and I've been a Trump supporter since the beginning. I've known him for well over a decade, and I even was traveling in the swing state of Pennsylvania with Ivanka, so I know the family very well. And gun control is something that they're passionate about. The issue that we just saw in Texas, by the way, gun control would have done nothing to protect us there. The people that were supposed to protect us, our government, did nothing. They failed. The Air Force was supposed to register this man who I won't even mention his name, and he would not have been able to obtain a gun, but guess what? He obtained a gun. The statistics show that 70% of mass shootings end in under 5 minutes, but the police response time is 11 minutes. So we need good people with guns to help as well.
Two people that haven't talked. Lauren Appel, she's a mom, was on the press team for Rick Santorum, who's Republican senator, freelance writer. I want you to, we're going to have to wrap this up, Keisha. I want to get you next. Can you give us a hopeful message for the future? We have this church shooting. We're all depressed and sad about that, thinking about the families. Something hopeful going forward.
Well, you know, and just to touch on the gun control thing, too, like she just said, the gun control would not have helped that. And taking a gun away from somebody, that doesn't take the evil away.
Right.
Because as we just saw here in New York City, somebody can just take a truck and plow into somebody, a pedestrian on the street, and do the same damage.
If anything, it makes the innocent more vulnerable. We can't defend ourselves.
It absolutely does. And I think moving forward, I think that, you know, President Trump is doing a great job, and I think that he has accomplished a lot in his first term in office without much help from Republicans in Congress. And I'm excited to see what the next year brings.
All right, Keisha Heaven on the front row, mom and attorney. You're a mom. What's the message you're telling your children about hope?
I would say, number one, we have to be unified, and we have to think about the safety of our country first and not get so much into who's right, who's wrong, Democrats versus Republican. I'm so tired of it. We need to just do what's right, and that's going to ensure that our children have a brighter future and put safety first and put more money in our law enforcement agencies. Instead of giving people the right to carry firearms, let's talk about the 28th Amendment, which puts safety of our citizens first.
Thank you all.